But there is something interesting about these games. Right? There's something super interesting, and here's what it is. We make outlandish and bold statements about these games, even though it's Thursday night football, even though there's less time to prepare. Why? Because they're the only game on. Right? Like, I got a question for you. I asked, the prevailing wisdom is Carson Wentz ain't playing great. Why? Because, well, we've seen some red zone highlights. We've seen some regular highlights. We've seen Twitter and people saying, look at the numbers. He's not playing all that well. I asked Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network about why Carson Wentz, Carson Palmer also not playing well, but he's also not playing football. Why Carson Wentz isn't playing well, he had this to say.
I think Carson Wentz is playing really well. I think he's played like MVP caliber level well. They had 7 drop balls in that game the other day. I think he's the least of their problems. They can't rush the passer, Doug. That's their issue right now. They've got to find a way to get home because in Jim Schwartz's defense, if your front four doesn't get home, I mean that's the lifeblood of that scheme. So they don't have the secondary personnel on the outside of the corner position to hold up if their front's not getting home. And right now that hasn't happened. So that's issue number 1 for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, the kid from Stanford, dropped a 40-yard bomb from Wentz, 4th and 15, 49 seconds remaining as they trail by 3. This followed an OPI call on Darren Sproles, which was an absolute seed. He threw it back shoulder to Darren Sproles on 4th and 5, and Darren Sproles just pushed off to get open. Probably didn't have to because it was a back shoulder throw. There were other drops in the game. And you go back, even the Atlanta game, remember 1:53 to go, Nelson Aguilar dropped an absolute a seed touchdown pass in his hands against cover 2. Or then you go to the final offensive play where Zach Ertz, runs a little dig route and is short of the sticks on 4th down. But because, and look, that was a Sunday night game. We did watch that game. But because there is so much else going on Sundays, we're not hyper-focused. We're not hyper-focused. Whereas on a Thursday night, the first Thursday night on Fox, Buck, Aikman, and crew and company, we're going to pay attention because it's Wentz who would have won the Heisman, the MVP 2 years ago. They did win the Super Bowl 2 years ago against a former MVP with a new offense that also isn't clicking. We're going to make huge, outlandish statements. Packers win tonight, 4-0. Packers lose tonight. All of a sudden, there's issues with their offense not fitting Aaron Rodgers. Eagles lose tonight, 1-3. Look at the Cowboys, 3-0. They're never going to win the division. We'll make outlandish statements based upon tonight. But we've done this with Wentz, even when they had Nick Foles, right? Like, they could have kept Nick Foles. They could have kept Nick Foles as not only the backup, they could have parted ways with Carson Wentz, but they gave Carson Wentz the biggest contract at the time we'd ever seen in the sport. Why? Because they know he's a dude. They're well aware. They know exactly what they have, exactly what his ceiling is. They didn't overvalue it. Okay, he may not be as incredible a guy as Nick Foles. Nick Foles is like you've worked with some of these guys that 0 people on earth don't like him. And because he's kind of been through the ringer in the NFL, I mean, frankly, played for Jeff Fisher as his coach. I mean, there you go, right? Offensive system of Jeff Fisher is, hey, you guys go out and get open. And we'll see if we can get you the ball. I like Jeff Fisher, but that offense, Jared Goff and Nick Foles might tell you otherwise. So I look at this and I say, the Eagles know they have a stud. So too do the Packers. Packers have a better defense than the Eagles right now. The Eagles haven't been healthy without Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson. Of course, Alshon Jeffrey's supposed to be back tonight. It should be a great football game. The Packers should win playing at home, and they haven't done anything offensive, and their defense is way better than most people expected. It's, by the way, why I picked them to go to the Super Bowl, because I've seen what they've done defensively, and everyone I know in the NFL is like, who's a really good defensive coordinator is Mike Pettin. Like, he's legit. But whatever happens tonight will be massive overstatement night. And if you don't believe me, think about what's happened in all of these standalone games. Marcus Mariota is done. Why? Well, he played terrible last Thursday night. Jacksonville is back. Why? Because they were Saxonville last Thursday night. I mean, Sunday night, we're ripping the Browns because the Browns, the Monday night before they played the Jets, but the Sunday night, most recently, they look like a flawed team. You know, Monday after the Jets, it was, boy, the Giants were stupid to let OBJ go because OBJ went crazy. Not, the Jets really stink. They were on the third quarterback. So this is kind of the nature of the beast. And it happens with any of these standalone games. Happens in college football, right? Like a Notre Dame game that's at 2:30 Eastern time and gets covered up by all the SEC and Big 10 and Big 12 games, not that big a deal. Night game under lights against an SEC foe where everybody's watching, and it was only up against, I think, Texas and Oklahoma State on network TV. Now you're like, oh, Notre Dame's pretty good. Yeah, well, they were pretty good in the semifinals last year, maybe better than Alabama. They were pretty good 2 years ago against Georgia. Standalone games seem to matter more in terms of the narrative. Maybe not the reality of the sport, but the narrative. Carson Wentz has been playing well. His wide receivers and defensive line have been playing poorly. We'll see how he plays tonight. Aaron Rodgers hasn't been playing great. The offense hasn't been in rhythm, but of course, if he plays well tonight, all is forgotten. Why? Standalone game against the Eagles, and people think the Eagles' defense is better than it actually is. I mean, even at 1-3, their season wouldn't be over. Remember, they have the Giants and the Redskins in their division. That's 4 wins. It's 4 wins, and they haven't gotten a crack on the Cowboys. I think they play Cowboys last game of the season as well, and they always play the Cowboys well. Don't get me wrong; the NFC is hyper competitive, right? Hyper competitive, but the NFC South looks like it's the Saints. They can keep it together to win. The NFC West, The NFC East, we see. The NFC North, probably the most competitive, but they're going to beat up on each other. I don't know. I wouldn't cancel Christmas if you lose tonight. I do think it'll be a telling game. I think you'll find the Packers defense is really good. I also think you'll go, hey, Carson Wentz is kind of awesome. His offensive line is We'll see if his receivers catch the football. They lead the league in drops. Jason La Canfora joins us on the Doug Gottlieb Show on Fox Sports Radio. I think nationally the narrative has been that Carson Wentz isn't playing that well. Then we see how many drops that they've had, leading the league in drops, 7 last week, couple game changers in both of the past 2 games. Are the Eagles concerned at all, Jason?
No. They, from a personnel standpoint, haven't been able to be who they'd like to be. That was a team, I saw them in the summer. I was like, my gosh, the D-line, the receivers, the tight ends, they're deeper than they need. And you know what? Now they're not. We're 3 weeks in and they're not. They literally couldn't run certain packages, a lot of them, from midway through that Atlanta game and then also last week, just because they didn't have enough guys they could trust at some of those very positions I noted. But Carson Wentz kept them in all those games, made enough plays, frankly, to win those games, and you factor in injuries, and some hit the offensive line as well, and mental mistakes and physical mistakes that others made, and that's all it'll take, in a lot of weeks. But no, if you've watched these games, Carson Wentz is, if anything, maybe he's doing a little too much at times, but understandably so because of the limitations that they've had from a roster standpoint at certain points. But no, they paid him for a reason, and he's going to be very, very good for a long time.
On the other side, Aaron Rodgers' offense stinks, right? Averaging 5 plays per possession, bottom of the league in almost every offensive category. I'm wondering if Aaron Rodgers is really Wayne Brady. And by that I mean, look, Wayne Brady, whose line is it anyway? He's amazing, right? When it's improv, he's incredible. Wayne Brady has never been in anything scripted that's decent at all. And, the way in which this new offense works is they kind of want to stick to the script, relatively speaking. And Rodgers seems to be struggling sticking to the script, no?
The whole offense is struggling. I mean, like if anybody thinks Matt LaFleur was some offensive genius last year in Tennessee, I would love to see the empirical evidence on film or through a box score or especially through any sort of breakdown of trends and tendencies that would make you think so. He ran the ball more than, exotic smash mouth Mike Mularkey ran the ball. He ran the ball more on first down than pretty much anybody in the league. And now he's got a very different toy at quarterback, but I think some of those tendencies are the same, and they're going to have to figure some things out. They've been bailed out by the turnovers. 48% of their points are off takeaways. They've got a +8 turnover ratio already. I don't believe that's sustainable. And they've needed it in all those points. I mean, they're 3-0, but they're going 3 and out 30% of the time. Their yards per play in the second half is second worst in the league to only the Jets, 5.9 yards per play. As the game flow changes and as you get off your script, they haven't had anything that's really working for them outside of the occasional long run that they might spring. I have some concerns about that. The defense, though, is much better, and they, much like Cleveland, they all just sort of, are putting this thing together, and it's in the very early stages. But a quarterback that good, I know he's not what he was 5 years ago just physically and some of the injuries he's had and everything, but, great left tackle, really solid offensive line, enough around him. They shouldn't be being compared to the Jets' offense in any way, shape, or form, and their numbers are a lot closer to the Jets than you would think in a lot of key metrics. I would say there's nowhere to go but up, and it probably will. But I go back to those interviews and how 4 hours with Matt LaFleur had them convinced that he's the guy for the next 10 years. That one left me scratching my head, and we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Hi, I'm Doug Gottlieb from Fox Sports Radio, and you need to subscribe to the Fox Sports Radio YouTube channel where you can hear and see me. Why not? Plus, everybody else who's awesome here in Fox Sports Radio.